We're today talking about cut flower gardens, which is kind of fun. I always do a vegetable garden. I do a lot of vegetable garden talks, but this is a cut flower one, and so there's so many great things with a cut flower garden. So some reasons that you might want to have a cut flower garden in your yard is the accessibility to fresh flowers that are in season. So when you cut your own fresh flowers, a lot of them last so much longer than a bouquet that you would buy at the grocery store. So a lot of cut flowers can have a week, up to 2-week vase life to them. And so that's one reason that's nice to be able to do your own. There's a lot of things that you might already have in your yard that you can also use as cut flowers, and we'll talk over that. Lots of shrubs and unique things. The key is to never be afraid to experiment with plant materials. You're going to go home and look at all the things you have in your yard. You're going to be like, I can use that, and I can use that, and I can use that, which is great. So a lot of it is using what you have. We're going to talk today about having a specific cut flower garden for annuals, which are going to be a bit more productive. And then we're going to also talk about having a perennial cut flower garden. And then if you already have existing gardens, how can you retrofit those existing beds if you're not wanting to add a new bed in? How can you tuck a handful of either annuals or longer blooming perennials into that garden? So one of the things you want to think about first when designing a cut flower garden is ample amount of sunlight. So a location is probably your first spot that you should stop at. Now, most flowering things for cut flowers are going to want full sun. But lots of people think of full sun is a spot in your yard that gets sun all day long. Anything from 6 hours or greater is considered full sun. So if you have a front yard that only gets like an eastern exposure or an area that gets just the afternoon, so a western exposure, those are considered full sun locations. But I also have lots of examples of things you can grow in a shade garden too that you can use as cut flowers as well. So the location and then the size of your garden matters. If you're doing a brand new garden, start small and do that successfully versus biting off more than you can chew. Because it's always better to be successful than to get a little discouraged along the way by having too big of a space to maintain. I know we all have so much time in our lives to devote to yard work. So I've got a design in the back of your back of your handout that starts out with a 4-by-8 foot garden. And I've got it for a perennial flower bed and for an annual flower bed. A 4-by-8 foot garden gives you quite a bit of cut flowers out of it. So you'd be surprised on how much you can get out of that. You can plant directly into the ground, like in a flower bed, or you can actually even build a raised bed, like you would for vegetable gardens, and do it as a cut flower garden. So there's lots of little options that you can use there. Soil. So if you're the one nice thing about doing a raised garden bed is it's new, fresh soil. You'll get usually a planter's mix to fill those with. So the planter's mix, like if you were to order some planter's mix or get bagged raised bed mixes, they're usually a mixture of compost and topsoil. And so that's already an amended mix. Usually if you get something like that, I usually even like to amend it a little bit more with an additional compost or a peat moss. And if you're doing a bed prep in the ground, that's where doing a really good soil amendment the first time. Cut flowers are heavy feeders. So think of them as an annual crop, like a vegetable, where you would feed it quite regularly. They're heavy feeders because you're asking them to produce a lot in a short period of time. So if you do just an annual cut flower garden, it's something that you're going to have to add compost to every single year, and fertilizer on top of that. So main thing is good soil preparation, and you can do a soil test if you want to see if you're low on any of your nutrients in your flower beds, and that goes for any kind of vegetable or flower garden as well. And you can get like those just little simple test kits. Ace Hardware carries them. Any of your local garden center carries them. And they're just the little thing, you mix some of your soil with water, and then it tells you if you're low in nitrogen and what your soil pH are. If you're concerned or you have a troublesome area of your yard that you've had a hard time getting things to grow, you can always send a sample of your stuff, of your soil in to the CSU's extension, the state extension website. And then when you do that, they have you take samples from all of your yard and then mix it all up and then send it in. When you do that, you get a way bigger breakdown of what your soil has in it and what it needs and what it's short on. And it gives you some suggestions on how to correct it. Like your soil's short on nitrogen, you need to add this much nitrogen to your soil. So we've got location, we've got soil amendments. Now we can start talking about some of the fun stuff, which is flowers. So cut flowers are kind of broken down. We can break them down further, but a good 4 different sections. You've got annuals, and annuals are flowers that complete their full life cycle in 1 year. So 1 annual year, and so that's the ones that you're going to buy, plant, and then by the fall, they're gone. And then there's perennials, which you plant, and they come back year after year after year. And then there is bulbs, which you plant, and they come back year after year after year as well. But you plant them in the fall to bloom in the spring. And then there is foliage plants or shrubs, trees and shrubs that you can use as well. So we'll start with annuals. So the fun thing about annuals is you can do them 3 different ways. You can buy transplants that are all ready to go in the ground that they sell. You can start your own seedlings, and a couple of you have mentioned that you've got some of your own seedlings started, which is really exciting. And then you can also get a lot of them as seeds. So with starting your own seeds inside, it's a little bit more time consuming. It's a little bit more effort. So the way to do that is to have trays with soil, and you seed them. You need a heat mat. You need a grow light. So it's definitely a bit more involved. The other option is, the one nice thing about starting your own seeds is it's certainly cost saving if you're going to do a large amount of seeding of starts. The other option is buying starts. So like this is a 4-pack of Cosmos, and so you get 4 plants in there. It's much easier, it's already started, a bit more expensive if you're doing a large area, but and you can get a wide array of things as starts. These are zinnias, those were Cosmos, there's Gomphrena, I've got some snapdragons, I've got some Verbena bonariensis. I'm not sure, has anyone here planted Verbena bonariensis? It's a really fun annual, and it's a tender perennial, so a lot of times it will come back. It is such a fun plant. It gets, the plant itself doesn't get very tall, only about 18 inches tall, but it throws up these ginormous spikes with purple balls on the end of them, and they're about this big, and I just love them, even in a perennial bed. I just love to have them dotted in and tucked in. I was even like thinking about how big the actual foliage part itself gets, and I'm like, you don't ever even notice that part of it. You always just notice, and they bloom at like 4 feet tall. So they're just lovely, and they are a midsummer to the end of summer bloomer. They're actually, verbenas, the whole verbena plant family is very cold tolerant, so it'll handle several frosts. Plus, then you can leave them in, and they'll provide architectural structure to your garden in the wintertime, and then the birds will clean the seed off of it too. Plus, Mother Nature will throw the seed around, which will then germinate next year. So, and they're easy to weed out if they ever become a little weedy. So I have had them overwinter many times in a garden. And then they will They will seed themselves around too. But if they're somewhere where you don't like them, just weed them out. It's pretty easy. So Bonariensis. I know, that's a word. And it's, yeah, Bonariensis. I don't even know if it has other than I don't think it really has another like common name. That's its scientific name, but and then there's other plants too, like annuals, like salvias that are great. Not this variety of marigold, but this marigold was looking really pretty on my racks at my house, so I brought it. So the big, this is a smaller bush type of marigold, but the African marigolds get really big. I mean, they'll get as well like 4 feet tall, and they get the big marigold heads on them. They make excellent cut flowers. They come in light yellows and cream and orange. They come in a wide range of colors. Snapdragons are one of my favorites. They're kind of like a childhood flower. I think we all can relate to making them, making their flowers open up like a lion. And they come in lots of beautiful flowers from red to pink to yellow. And the ones you use for cut flowers get really tall. So that's a great one. Cosmos, they come in all kinds of fun different colors. Pinks are primarily pinks and whites and red tones. There is a really lovely variety that's peachy toned and one that's yellow toned. There is an orange one, but the peachies and the yellows and then the pink shades, white, are the most popular usually. You do. There are, so like for an example, zinnias, right? This is a variety of zinnias that gets that 3 to 4 feet tall. So big. A lot of them that I plant at my clients' houses are the short, like profusion zinnias or the bushy ones that only get to be 12 to 18 inches tall. They're going to have a mass of flowers and be good for a mass planting, but they're not great for cut flowers unless you've got little bud vases or something. But like these zinnias here are specifically meant for cut flowers, so they're going to be big. And so that's the hard thing. A lot of your cut flowers are plants that get tall. Another great annual I've got here. This actually is probably one of the queens of cut flower gardens, and these are dahlias. So dahlias are really one of the most lovely cut flowers, and they're also a big plant. We're talking more in that 5 to 6 foot range, so big plant. So with a lot of these bigger plants, keep in mind that you probably have to have some bamboo stakes around to help support them and stake them. So dahlias are great. They come in the widest range of colors. They come in bicolors. They come in every range. We've set the mood now, haven't we? Thank you. And so they come in every color. They come in purples and pinks and yellows and reds. They come in greens. They come in cream. They come in striped. I mean, every color you could ever possibly imagine. And the dahlias come in. And so, yeah, that's another thing. You can get anything from like small dahlia flowers to mediums, and then the dinner plate ones. Cafe au lait is a spectacular example. I mean, they get ginormous and big and beautiful, and you can make such pretty cut flowers out of them. The fun thing is you buy dahlias as a root. You can buy them as starter plants too, but you can buy them as a root in a package and then get them planted. So all of these annuals you want to plant after the risk of frost has passed. So usually in our climate, that's Mother's Day. I always say, just to be on the safe side, I usually wait to start planting my annuals, like for my clients, till the 3rd week of May, because there's more times than I can count than we got a snow on the 20th of May. I mean, it just is a very frequent thing. And then you're running outside trying to cover everything. So you want to plant these in the ground. You can plant the bare root part. You just get them in a bag. They're bare root. You just stick them in the ground, and then they start to grow. So with a lot of your cut flowers, brace yourself. Are we all ready for this? Okay. Okay. So with a lot of your cut flowers, how to get more branching out of them, to get more cuts and more flowers out of them? You pinch them back, okay? And you can even go further, okay? So I know, I was like, brace yourself, I'm cutting it. Okay, so now what's going to happen? Do you see these 2 sets of leaf unions? Instead of one stem, which on a dahlia can get really big and stocky. Can you imagine that'd be pretty hard to make a floral arrangement out of? So now what's going to happen is it's going to send 2 branches up. So instead of one cut flower, you're going to have 2 full branches up. And then so it can continue to also send up multiple along this whole stem. So one dahlia plant, you can get, 6 or more cut flowers out of just one plant. Yeah. So something you can clip, not everything, like I wouldn't clip the verbena. You can clip a cosmos, you can clip a zinnia. Snapdragons is another one of those that you almost have to snip, and you just pinch back. And when you pinch a plant back, you pinch it back to a set of leaves. And like something like the snapdragon, I could just snip with my fingers, pinch it with my fingers, which is where the term green thumb came from. Because when you pinch a plant back with your fingers, your thumb turns green. So, but I know, silly. There is a whole list of plants that you cut back versus ones that you don't. And just a good resource is something like, have you guys ever watched the Growing Floret show on the Discovery Channel? Oh, you guys, if you guys love cut flower gardens, you have to see this show. Her name's Erin, and she has a several acre cut flower garden in the Skagit Valley in Oregon. Or Washington, sorry. I'm in Washington, and she grows the most magnificent cut flowers. And she does a lot of research on breeding, so she breeds a whole line of dahlias and celotias, and she's just the neatest lady. But she's written many, many books. And this is her right here, and these are her dahlias. But anyways, she's got so this is a great resource book. She's got everything from starting your own seeds to growing specific plants, and she's got care on all of this stuff, which plants to pinch and which plants not to pinch. So that's a great resource. She's got several books out. She's got just one on dahlias, a whole book on just dahlias. And so, yeah, she's full of great information. So those are good annuals. Now, perennial gardens, which I'm assuming a lot of you might already have. In the back of the thing, I did include a design for just a 4 by 8 foot perennial garden too. Some of those plants I've got here. But I've got some that aren't in that design. One of them being lupin. Lupin's an earlier bloomer. And it grows these great spikes. And so that's another question, that's another thought of when you harvest some of these. So the majority of plants you harvest, you want to harvest them before they're fully open. Have you ever cut flowers from a garden outside and then they faded quickly? So and it's everybody's instinct to cut them when they're fully open, but you actually want to do it when they're about 70% closed. So this is actually maybe even a little far along, but like, do you see how these down here are open, but these here are still closed? Well, this would be a good time to cut the flower, so then when you brought it inside, it could fully then open up.
Can you show us where would you cut?
So I actually would probably forego a flower stalk here and cut it down to here.
So what happens with a plant like that when you cut it?
It will, this is a perennial, so it'll come back year after year, so it's not going to hurt it at all. And what it'll do, it'll force it to do is probably throw out potentially another. Now, if this was an established perennial, so with perennials, so one of the benefits of doing perennial cut gardens is that they come back year after year after year after year, right? And so it's an investment up front and a time investment up front, but they will live. I mean, I've got some peonies here, for example, that they'll live over, I mean, hundreds of years. So they can live for a long lifetime. But in a lupin plant that's established in your garden, each plant is going to be this big. And you might have 20 stalks of flowers on one plant. And so the nice thing by cutting one or cutting two or cutting three or whatever, it'll just keep producing more. Now with perennials, they have a bloom time. There's very few perennials that start in the spring and bloom to the fall. But so like lupin is a late spring bloomer and will bloom into early summer. So usually most of your perennials, you'll get a good 2 to 3 week bloom time out of it. So that means you've got to plan in your garden so you'll have continual blossoms as you go along. So another great one, and not everything of mine I've got is blooming, it's just the season, it's an early season, but this is a purple coneflower or echinacea, and this variety is actually a really fun one. It's called Cheyenne Spirit, and Cheyenne Spirit blooms lots of colors. So in one variety of plant, you'll have yellow, you'll have orange, you'll have peach, you'll have pink. So it blooms a whole array of colors. But this is a late summer bloomer. So it blooms, say, in August on, and it is a long bloomer, so you get a good length of time out of it. You'll probably get a month to maybe 5 to 6 weeks out of it. So great one. And purple coneflowers, not this variety, but the straight purple coneflower is a native. So that's one positive thing with perennials, but with your annuals too, is it does help pollinators. So it's good for bees. It's good for especially some of our native bees that we have, honeybees, bumblebees. And a lot of these can be hosts to butterflies. Yarrow, I did say, majority of perennials don't bloom for very long. They usually are like 3 to 5 weeks. Yarrow is a workhorse. So if you don't have yarrow in your garden, it's also a cultivar. This is a cultivar of our native yarrow. This is moonshine yarrow. Yarrows can be a little messy in the landscape because they like to spread by runners. They can be a little difficult to dig out. So this is what I call the well-behaved yarrow. This is moonshine yarrow. It forms like a good 18 to 24 inch clump, and it stays put. And this thing blooms from pretty much now till the end of summer. It blooms. It'll be one of your last blooming things in your garden. The fun thing is the silvery foliage can be semi-evergreen. So you can have that silvery foliage in your garden, which is nice to have a little bit different color and a little bit different texture in amongst your garden as well. So depending on the cultivar, so some cultivars will revert back to their original. Moonshine yarrow does not do that. It has a gold color and it stays that way. One thing that people don't think of when they do cut flowers is an ornamental grass. So this is what I was saying. We're going to be creative with some of what we're using as some of our cut flowers, right? So this is a maidenhair grass. This is a variety. There's lots of varieties. There's dwarf varieties. There's big varieties. This is a bigger one. You're going to get to be about 5 feet tall with this, and so it's got a lot of bonuses on it. One, the texture in the garden. It takes up a good amount of space. The texture in the garden adds winter interest with the foliage. You can use the foliage in your cut arrangements, and then it gets seed heads on it in the fall, which you can also use. So seed heads make, and these in particular, Miscanthus has the most beautiful seed heads to them. And then this will turn kind of a reddish fall color, and then turn brown for the winter. So lots of benefits. This is maidenhair grass, Miscanthus. This is a fun one. Now this is not a variety you're going to get really long cut flowers out of, but they make great little filler flowers. I made the cutest. Okay, I'm gonna tell you a fun secret of mine, and with the potential of not being able to find cute antique teacups ever again. So I love to buy antique teacups at Goodwill and places like that. And I put a little bit of floral foam. This isn't an arrangement class, but maybe we'll do one day. I put a little bit of floral foam in the teacup, and then, because the teacup will hold water, and then I make little arrangements, flower arrangements in the antique teacup, and then I give them as like get better gifts, or get well gifts, or congratulation gifts, and it doesn't take, and then even if you don't have cut flowers at home, buying a small cheap bouquet at a grocery store, it's amazing. It doesn't take a lot of flowers to fill them. So, but this would be a great one for a smaller arrangement. This is Coreopsis, and it has these beautiful bright yellow flowers. But you can get a good, 8 to 10 inch, cut flower out of them, and they'll last a really long time. So you'd be wanting to cut it. So like this would be an example where this is just starting to open up, and some of these are in an earlier stage. And so this would be a good stage to cut it at, when it's opening, in the process of opening up, but not fully open up like these big guys. Bingo. That goes that way pretty much for almost all the plants. The more you cut them, in particular the annuals too, the more you cut them, the more blooms they're going to put on. This one's great. Irises. They're also a late spring one. So they're getting ready to bud up now. So I would say within the next 2 weeks, our irises are going to start. And this is, I just grabbed this from the nursery to show, because it had some color on it. But you would want to cut it when it was still in that closed state, because then you put it in water, then they open up. And you would cut these stems like all the way down to the base of the leaves. Yeah. Again, so like this has got 1, 2, 3 fans. So a lot of these plants are small because they're new. But when you have irises in a garden, they will spread by rhizomes. That's the structure of roots. So you can buy them in the fall just as rhizomes. You can buy them potted up now. It's easier and more affordable to do when you're buying just rhizomes in the fall. You buy them with bulbs. They come in a little earlier. They come in the end of August, beginning of September. Your garden centers will carry them, and then they multiply and spread. And so every 3 to 5 years, it's actually good to lift them and divide them, and then give them away. They're a great giveaway plant. So each plant will produce lots. Like I have a 4 by 4 foot patch of irises, and I probably could get 30 to 40 cut flowers out of them if I used them all as cut flowers. So, a grouping of them, yeah. So, you know, just what I was just talking about, dividing them every 3 to 5 years, it's good to lift those, because what happens is they grow and they grow and they multiply and they multiply and multiply, and then they get too crowded, and then they stop being as productive. So what you do when you lift those and divide them, you break off all the little side shoots. Those are the young ones, and then you get rid of some of those really old roots, because they're like the mother plant, and they're just tired and done. So you kick them to the curb. I have a teenager right now, and I feel exactly like that. You know? But so if they stop being productive, that is one reason they might need to be divided. Another reason is they might be planted too deep. They kind of have a foot, so they have like a frond that comes up here, a fan, and then they have this weird thing that sticks out that the roots come off of. So I call that the foot. That foot needs to be at surface level. You need to be able to see the top of it on top of the dirt. And otherwise, if they're buried too deep, they won't bloom. And they don't like too much water. If you water them too much, they will rot out. I was just going to say, and the one fun thing about the grape one, there's a green leafed variety as well. It's like this really pretty powdery purple color. It's like a soft bluish purple. The same with that. That's the exact color of the variegated one. But it comes in a green form too. It smells like grapes, just like grapes, like Jolly Rancher grape. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, we'll jump in since we're doing good smelly things. Okay. Another really fun one that you can't have a cut garden almost without is lavender. It's just amazing. So the nice thing about lavender is that, like, this is Munstead lavender. It's a variety of English lavender, which is the hardiest here. So lavender we think of as a perennial. It's actually considered a sub-shrub. So it is a woody plant, and it will continue to get woody, and it'll grow and get bigger. A hard winter can be hard on them sometimes, and they can die back. And an area with too much moisture can also be a little hard for them. But they bloom usually early summer, and they're amazing. And you can then cut their flowers. You can do lots of things with them. To use them, like if you're going to dry them, you cut them right as they're starting to open and show color, and then you can just bundle them up and hang them upside down and dry them, and then you can use them in sachets. You could use them just as lavender bundle clusters that way, or you can just use them as cut flowers. So anything that throws out a blue spike like this is going to be more of a bee attractant. So it might not be something that where you want by a water source like a pool or something like that, but I have been working with plants for 25 plus years, and I have never gotten stung by a bee in the garden. Never once. So bees are collecting pollen. They're worker bees. They have a mission, and unless you're like harassing it, trying to grab it, they will leave you alone. Now, there are a lot of wasps that look a lot like bees, and the majority of stings are really just wasps, and they're just jerks. So you can they are pollinators. I will say they are pollinators, but you know, if you have a wasp problem or something like that, you can always put a pheromone trap out, and that's really successful. But so they will. Things like Russian sage, lavender, Coreopsis, or Echinops. A lot of those are just going to, a lot of them in the blue-purple family, they are going to attract bees. So, which is a good thing, really, because it is feeding the bees. So, if you're allergic to them, I mean, I get that. And another great one is Black-Eyed Susans. So there's different varieties of black-eyed Susans. This one here is a Goldstrom. Rudbeckia is another name for it. And they produce, Rudbeckias produce daisy-like gold, daisy-like flowers, black-eyed Susans. That's a Goldstrom. It's not going to produce flowers as long cut flowers, but there's some great, what we consider annual varieties, like Prairie Sun or Irish Eyes has a green center, and they produce much bigger cut flowers of Rudbeckias, and they are a tender perennial. I've got 6 or 7 that overwinter into my garden every year. The Denver Daisy, did everyone remember when they released the Denver flower called the Denver Daisy? That's a Rudbeckia. And it is, well, like I said, it's a tender perennial, so I frequently will have them overwinter. And you can usually get those as 4-packs too, so it's like a big bang for your buck. But they put on big flowers and a good 30-inch plant. Yeah. I was going to say, did your bunnies eat them? She's got a bunny problem. It's because she's got this like massive juniper hotel that they live in. But yeah. Yeah. Bunnies like black-eyed Susans. You can put a bunny deterrent on it, but that's a frequent thing. You have to do it, and then you could have to mix it up because they get used to that smell. And it stinks. Bunny deterrents just stink. So, yeah. They smell like rotten eggs and garlic. What would
So the peppers don't get rid of them, like cayenne or something?
You can. There's actually a really good, a good bunny deterrent. And it's actually, is it Bobex? Not Bobex. It is, I'll come back to it, guys. I got to think about it for 2 seconds. It's dehydrated blood.
What?
Dried blood.
Dried blood. And it comes in a granular form, but it's really effective. There's Bobex. There's lots of different kinds. So you can go out with actual garlic, like granulated garlic, and sprinkle it into your beds too. But yeah. Yeah, yeah. They can be a nuisance, but you can cage off individual plants to keep bunnies out of them if you. Plant skid. Thank you. I was having a brain fart. So lilies are also great. Cut flowers. So this is not a daylily, which most of you might be familiar with. These are garden lilies. So, like an Easter lily. Easter lilies is a type of garden lily. So garden lilies that they use for cut flowers, they're going to get tall too. They're going to get to be that 3 to 4 foot range. But there's ones that are called stargazers, which are pink and white and really beautiful. I think these ones here are just a white variety that get big, and they'll produce quite a few flowers from each little stem. They do them in a cluster. So like this one stem would be a cut flower. Okay, some of our uncommon things now we can talk about. So a lot of you have trees and shrubs in your yard that you can poach. So one that makes a great cut flower, let me get this guy out of here, is a lilac. And with lilacs, you want to harvest them just again as they're breaking bud. They'll give you the most amount of life. And a lot of people will harvest these and then they won't last very long. So the key to getting them to last long is to take a sharp pair of pruners and cut up the stem. And you want to go a good 2 inches. Okay? And that opens that whole xylem and phloem up to suck up some more water. and that'll help last long. These are such great, and they smell good. So I have this theory. Everybody has a mother flower, and everybody has a grandmother flower. My lilacs are my grandmother flower. Delphiniums are my mother flower. But more importantly, flower is my grandmother flower, lilacs. She had hedge and hedge and hedge of lilacs. And when I was little, I would go and pick all the lilacs and bring them in and make a vase for her. And it's just one of the smell and everything just takes me back to when I was like 7 and I used to cut flowers for her. And I just, they're probably my favorite. Okay, so, and then I don't have any here because I didn't have any I could steal from. Flowering crab apples are great. So forsythias and flowering crab apples are great. One fun thing you can do you have a flowering crab apple tree in your yard, before, like in the winter months, so like say February, before the trees are even thinking about blooming, you can go out and cut branches off and you can force them. So just by cutting them off and bringing them into the house and keeping them with some fresh water and that warm temperature, they will flower in the middle of February in your house. So fun. So the great thing about like something like a flowering crabapple would be that you get the flowers from it. And a lot of them have really interesting foliage colors. So a lot of them have those purple hues. So they make the foliage themselves, once they're done blooming, the foliage color itself makes great things to stick in arrangements. And then it's really fun to do fall arrangements if your crabapple has fruit on it. So sticking those crabapple branches in with the fruit hanging in there makes such a great addition and structure to an arrangement. So that's a great one. One of my favorite shrubs, and I even did this for my own wedding. I poached my shrubs. So is 9-bark, and anything that's got some unique foliage color. So 9-barks are great, and this is a type of 9-bark called Diablo, and they're big. They get to be good 6 to 8 feet tall. They could be maintained and managed down to about 5 feet. But this is a variety called Diablo. They are just now leafing out. So normally their leaves are a lot bigger and fuller. But it's got this really beautiful kind of burgundy, purplish, brownish color to it. And they do get flower heads on them, little clusters of white flowers. And then once those flowers are gone, they put these really cool kind of rusty, same color as the leaf seed heads on them that eventually dry to brown, but such a great plant to tuck in. A lot of people have the gold spireas in your yard. Great for making like gold foliage in your floral arrangements. So that's a good one. Forsythias too are fun, like I was saying. You can force forsythia branches. If any of you've got big forsythias, you can cut those in February and bring them into the house and they'll force. But also don't overlook things. Like I said, we're going to be creative in our yard. This is lactinata kale, or dinosaur kale they also call it. The foliage makes great tuck-ins to floral arrangements because it's nice and big. Plus you can eat it. A lot of times people will use cut basil stems in their floral arrangements. You can also use things like, this is rosemary. You can also use rosemary tucked in there, especially if you're having like people over for a fun dinner. Tucking things like basil or rosemary into there or edible brings that kind of second layer of a floral arrangement that also is very enticing with smell too. Oh, yeah, exactly. It's
fantastic.
Yeah. Using fruit or vegetables in any of your arrangements is really fun too. You can use things like ferns, like if you have fern in a shadier part of your garden, ferns work great. We talked about the foliage of the grass works really well. And any of your evergreens, so if you have boxwoods at your house or junipers or pine or spruce branches. Spruces are a little hard for floral arranging because their needles are pokey, but firs and pines are soft. Don't be, especially if you're doing arranging in like a winter arrangement. It's so fun to add that with some white flowers, with some red berries. It makes a great arrangement. One of my, then there's coral bells too. You can use the foliage itself, and there's taller varieties like Purple Palace gets really tall, big, long, big leaves. So you can use that. This is a fun variety that has a really pretty pink flower. Those make great.
What was the name of it?
Coral bells or heuchera coral bells. And then peonies, I don't know why I didn't talk about peonies to begin with, but when I was talking about perennials, but peonies are great. Peonies are just one of the most luxurious cut flowers. I've got some cut peonies here. So peonies are a very long-lasting perennial shrub. They'll live hundreds of years. One of my favorite stories is when I was in Montana, I used to just love to go driving in the country, just along dirt roads, and it was something I really enjoyed doing. And in this old farmhouse, there was a particular time in the springtime, there was in the middle, this old abandoned farmhouse. The grass was this tall, and somebody hadn't lived in it in over 50 years. In there was this beautiful rose bush blooming, and it was a good 12 feet tall. It was an Austrian copper rose bush, and Austrian copper has yellow and orange, like flame orange flowers on it. This whole thing was a mass of these bright colors. And in the grass field, you could tell there was an old, like, kind of a wooden fence, and in front of it, in the middle of this grass, you could see these peonies and orange poppies. So this fuchsia colored peony and these orange poppies blooming, and they had zero care for, I mean, at least 50 plus years, just blooming their heads off. So peonies are just one of those that if you're gonna have a cut flower garden, you have to plant a peony. One, the scent is just amazing. I mean, they're so lovely. And this one's a little tricky because people want to pick a peony when they're fully open, but they don't last very long for you. You want to pick a peony in what's called the marshmallow stage. So you've got a bud like this, and they're just a little squishy. That's the perfect time to pick a peony for a cut flower. This one would still work, but it's just a little farther gone. They do. So if you have problems with your peonies flopping in your garden, a great way to combat that is they make this lovely grow-through grid. So it's a peony hoop, or it's not really called a peony hoop, it's called a grow-through grid. So it's a circle, and you can get them in different sizes, but a good 2-foot one, 16, 18 inches wide one is great. And so it's a circle, and then it's got a grid. Okay? You lay that on the ground in the springtime before the peony comes up. And then the peony grows its stems up through this grid. And then as it grows up, you shimmy the grid up and stand it on its legs. And then so you're not like where traditional peony hoops just as an outside ring. And then what happens is your peonies get so big and heavy, if we get a rain like we just did, they bend over and then they break on the edge of that peony support, where the individual flowers are supported. And it is a night and day difference for your peonies. I mean, they will just stay upright and they won't flop at all. So, I mean, it legitimately catches all of those. And a peony does not like to be disturbed. So once you plant it, you want to leave it there for at least 5 years. Just leave it alone. Now, you won't get much for blooms out of it. The first year, you'll get a few. It's the second year is when you can start taking flowers off it. So like I said, perennials are a little bit of an investment, but then you'll have it for forever. So peonies, just like a lot of your perennials, they kind of get bigger and multiply. So after 5 years, you can take a sharp shovel and go down the middle of it and divide it in like 4 different sections, and then dig that chunk up and move them to different places, give them to people. A lot of people get scared of dividing perennials, but it's not as scary as it actually, it looks brutal when it happens, but it's not. Plants are pretty tough. No, it's just ants. What happens is a peony, when it's all tight, it produces like a sticky resin, and the ants just like the sticky sap, so they just eat it. It's kind of an old wives' tale that they need the ants to eat it for the blossoms to open. No, they just are taking advantage of a good situation. Yeah, they are. So there's tree peonies. So like these here, I would still consider peony bushes, but they die back to the ground every year. Their eyes are underneath the soil. So there are things called tree peonies that are woody, and they don't die back to the ground every year, and it's important not to cut them back to the ground every year, because they'll, like a regular shrub, they'll leaf out on old stems. So those are tree peonies, and they actually have a combo of them called ithone peonies. And after this, I'll show you guys some pictures. I took some pictures at the nursery that are just, I'm like, I need one of you. But the nice thing is they're a combo of both, so they can sometimes leaf out on woody stems, or if they die back to the ground, they will still bloom. Like a true tree peony, if it dies back to the ground, it's kind of done. And so these ithone peonies, and they come in the most spectacular colors, yellow and fuchsia and orange and coral colors, and they're just to die for. But they will, if they die back to the ground, they're fine. They can regrow and they're fine. So, and they get big. These things, the tree peonies and the ithone peonies, can get a good 3 to 4 feet. I-T-H-I-O-N, ithone? I-T-H-O-N, maybe. I'll look it up for you. But, so yes. So, okay, so we kind of went through all the plants. So to get them maintained, so they need proper maintenance. So whether it's a perennial, annual, or a combo of both, they need to be maintained. So you want to make sure you put a good layer of mulch down so that you're weeding. It helps retain moisture, and it also helps keep your weeds down and makes your life a little easier. So, and then make sure they have adequate water. So perennials are a little bit more flexible, and some of them are actually pretty drought tolerant. They can go, as long as you're watering deeply, even once a week, they can be watered just once a week. So that's kind of the positive thing about perennials. But your annuals are going to be a lot more water loving, and so you want to make sure you keep up on the water, especially during those hot months of July and August. Because if you lack on the water there, it's going to hurt your flower production. Now, you can do that either by hand watering or a hand sprinkler, or you can put them on your drip irrigation system if you've got drip. And if you're doing like a raised bed, and if you currently have irrigation, those can be added, and they can be done as like strip. So you're just watering along the ground in like a drip type irrigation, or they can be like micro sprays, or even your big sprinkler heads can water them. And then fertilizer. So perennials aren't as heavy fertilize needers, but you want to fertilize them a good couple times a year, especially if you're pushing them for flowers. And then I use just a granular organic fertilizer. Richlawn, which is a local company, they make a great perennial and rose food fertilizer. They're local, so they are actually, it's an organic based fertilized company, and it uses dehydrated poultry waste, and they make egg. They actually have their chickens, and their eggs are Eggland's Best, as what are local, and they make a great fertilizer. It's a good local company. ProRich or Richlawn, and a lot of you guys might use like a Richlawn fertilizer for your lawns, and all garden centers carry it. Even Home Depot carries it, but it's just a great all-purpose fertilizer that works well. And then your...
Think about Osmocote.
You can use Osmocote. Osmocote is it's formulated. It's got a time release kind of capsule around it, so it slowly fertilizes. That works just fine. Yep. And then with like an organic type fertilizer like the Richland, it's also naturally slow releasing. Most organic fertilizers break down slowly, so that it does a slow release fertilizer. So fertilize heavily with your annuals. You'll want to apply like a soil fertilizer at least once a month on those. And then for cut flowers, so so we can talk about that. I guess we didn't talk much about bulbs. We'll take a 5-second detour and go back. So the other group is bulbs. Okay, here's a few examples of them. Tulips are bulbs that you plant, or bulbs are plants that you plant in the fall as a little bulb, and then for spring blooming. So that would include tulips, daffodils. This is a daffodil or narcissus called Thalia. And it's a lovely little one if you guys have never seen this one. They produce these little clusters of blooms on them. They're a great naturalizing bulb, meaning they make multiples, and it can handle some shade. So yeah, these ones are in my front yard. Tulips are great. They come in all different colors and sizes. And then this is allium, which is a great bulb that you plant. This is one called Sensation. When they're fully open, they're about the size of my hand here, and it'll probably get double this size. And they also multiply. And if you don't get them picked before they throw seed, they'll throw seed and you'll have them everywhere. But and so these get nice and big. They come in all different sizes and shapes and colors too. So when you're making an arrangement, key things to keep in mind is have a bucket of water out there with you when you're picking. These little metal things troughs are great, but as soon as you cut it, you'll want to then put it into water right away. And a key, so you want fresh, clean water, and then a key is to keep as much of the foliage out of the water as you can. So you go through, even when you are out and you first cut it, strip the lower 3/4 of the leaves off, because if the leaves sit in the water, they will cause it to get icky and gross, because they'll start to rot and break down, and that'll cause your water to grow gross faster. So you'll want to strip all the leaves off of it and then put that right away in water. So what you need to have is either a pair of good sharp snips. Mine are a little sticky, so I could probably clean these, but good sharp snips or a good pair of pruners, so that it makes a nice clean cut. So when you first pick them, you always want to have that nice fresh cut and then get it to water as fast as you can. Okay? And in your water, you can add like a floral life to the vase. A lot of people just think of that as flower food, but there actually is other ingredients in it that helps keep the bacteria level in your water down. You can actually also add like a little splash of hydrogen peroxide. Let's say you don't have any floral preservative in your house. A splash of hydrogen peroxide works well. You can actually also add a splash of bleach to your water too, and that just helps keep the bacteria down and the flowers lasting longer. And then we talked a lot in pretty big length about the best time to harvest your flowers. So there is a best time of day though as well. So you either want to do when it's cool out, you either want to do it in the early morning or in the evening, like the early evening as the sun's setting. Those are your two best times to cut your flowers so that they will last the longest. If you do it in the heat of the day, they've lost a lot of their moisture due to evaporation, so they won't last as long for you. And then other tools that you might want to keep in mind. Obviously, sharp set of snips, a good pair of pruners, stakes like the bamboo stakes. They carry the metal plastic coated ones too. I like the bamboo. They hold up for a really long time, and then when they're done, they go back to the earth. But I also if I have a bamboo stake that's not valid for staking something, I cut them down and use them for bed markers for my, like row markers for my vegetable gardens. So a good pair of gardening gloves. I've used probably every single gardening glove on the market, and most of them, like with my type of work, will only last me a week or two. These bamboo gloves, though, are very durable. I buy 6 to 8 pair for the whole season. I mean, that's me using them for 6 to 8 hours every day, so I use them heavily. But the nice thing, too, is you can always, if they get gross or dirty, you can always throw them in the washing machine and wash them. So good pair of gardening gloves are great. So some tools that I just never would be without. You'll never see me without my Hori Hori, which is also a scary big butcher knife, which makes me feel very strong if any threatening people ever come my way. And then my good set of pruners. And you'll actually, I wear pants that hold them in their pockets because I'm that big of a nerd. So you'll always see me with gloves in my back pocket and my I'm ready to go. And so a Hori Hori. So a Hori Hori is just a Japanese weeding tool, and it looks like a big scary knife. The nice thing is most of them will have inch markers on it. So like if you're planting bulbs and a tulip bulb needs to be 6 to 8 inches, well, this is 6 inches from, there, and so you kind of, you stab the ground with this. That's how it works when you're planting. I mean, literally, you just stab the ground. So then it helps you with the depth, but it's also great at weeding. If you need to cut grass, like, it's got a serrated edge to them. Most of them have a sharp edge. I've used this hook for lots of things. I've pulled edging pins out with this hook. So great tool. The authentic Hori Horis, or the Japanese weeding knives, will be beautiful Japanese steel. And I have one at my house. I have work tools, and then I have my more posh home tools. And but they'll have a Japanese steel blade, and it runs all the way through a wooden handle. They're beautiful. But Amazon carries them too. And then a trowel. This is a heart-shaped trowel. I love this little trowel, so I will use that. For big work, I don't know if any of you have used a spading fork. It's different than a pitchfork. Pitchfork has round tines, and a spading fork has flat tines. The flat tines helps it cut into the soil really well. So you use this to turn over like a flower bed. You can use it for everything. You can use it to plant a plant by digging up a hole. The nice thing is the tines go in, and then you can lift, and then if it's a clump of dirt you take off, you just smack it with that, and the dirt clod kind of falls apart. So it works great. I use this to turn over flower beds, and I use it to turn over my vegetable garden. So it's a pretty invaluable, I turn my compost pile with it, really invaluable tool to have. So these are kind of like my key tools that you'll always see me have on me. So, okay. Well, do we have any questions? I know we've kind of been asking as we go, but yes. Sometimes they will. So most of your bulbs, allium is kind of an exception. Most of your bulbs, like tulips and daffodils, you want to make sure that, so they'll have the foliage, and then when they're done blooming, you want to make sure you deadhead them so that they don't put that production into seed. So whenever they're done blooming, like a tulip, let's say, I'm sure I could even show you outside. Let's say this was a done bloom. You want to go through and pinch that off so it doesn't put production into producing seeds, so that it puts that production in, keeps that into the bulb. So that's one thing. But then once the tulip is done blooming, then you have all this green foliage on there. With tulips and daffodils and other bulbs as well, crocuses, little bulbs, you want to make sure that foliage turns nice and brown. So like turns into a yellow color before you remove that foliage. Because once this is done blooming, this foliage is the food for next year's blossoms. So what's going to do when it turns yellow, it's pulling all of that green chlorophyll, which is the food for the plant, and it stores it into the bulb for next year's blooms. Okay, so that could be one reason. Not being planted deep enough. I love tulips and daffodils when they're blooming. They're one of my least favorite things. I totally admit this. I hate planting bulbs. Hate planting bulbs because it's a lot of work. Tulip and daffodil bulbs need to go like 8 to 9 inches deep. And it's a lot of work for no payoff right then. You don't get the payoff till 6 months later. And so if you plant them too shallow, they won't bloom again for you. If they're in too much shade, they won't bloom again for you. And tulips can just be brats. So they are a shorter-lived they're a shorter-lived flowering bulb. So you might get a couple years of blossoms out of them, but sometimes then they wither and fade, and then you'll just get foliage. And so you can leave them for a few more years to see if they will do anything. Otherwise, a lot of people will just treat them like annuals. So like the cut flower growers who grow tulips for cut flowers, it's really painful to see. So what they do as a cut flower, they dig up the whole bulb. They store them that way, and then when they get ready to ship them, they cut them off, they throw the bulb away, and then they give you your flower. So they treat those bulbs as annuals. Now daffodils, I tend to like daffodils sometimes a little bit better. Tulips, the bunnies will eat too, but daffodils, nothing will eat. So that's the fun thing. And daffodils comes in all colors and sizes. So they come in big, they come in yellow, they come in double, they come in multicolor. They come in lots of colors. My yellow ones, I had some big yellow ones. They were just unfortunately done blooming. So you got the little white ones. But they will bloom and they will multiply and they don't fade. So that's the nice thing about like a daffodil. If you want tulips, try to go with the Darwin hybrids. The Darwin hybrids are the big flowering tulips that get the big good sized flower heads on them. Those are going to be longer lasting for you. And then also get from a good place, get good quality bulbs, because there are a lot like that gets sold at like Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the big box stores. They're a different quality of bulb. So if you looked at a tulip bulb from a garden center, like a local garden center versus one you get in like a Home Depot, not to trash Home Depot, they have their purpose too, but it's going to be a much bigger, healthier bulb. And they're going to have a lot of potential bloom spikes in it too, especially with daffodils. With a daffodil in like a big box store, you might get one blossom out of it, or it might not blossom the first year and it might blossom the second year. But if you're getting a good quality bulb, you'll get a couple blossoms out of it the first year. So yes. Technically, you can divide a perennial in at any time. It usually won't kill them, but it might make them look a little rough. One of my favorite times to do it is in the springtime. But if it's a spring blooming one, I tend not to do it in the springtime. I tend to do that then in the fall. Yeah. But it's easy. So I will use this because this is a bigger, I won't hurt this, I promise. So basically, you get a fork or a sharp shovel in the middle of the plant, and then you just step down on it really hard. And then you can do it, if you're doing it in fours, do it in the other way and step down on it really hard and then dig that one chunk up. So hostas are great to do that on. Peonies are too once they've been in the ground long enough. But lavender, I wouldn't ever do that to. black-eyed Susans, these things can be a little unruly in the garden. They do this weird slow marching thing where all of a sudden you're like, you were in a 2 by 2 foot area and now you're like taking over half the garden. This one is great to just dig chunks off of it. So it technically can be done at any time. If you're doing it in the heat of the summer, it's just you're going to have to babysit a little bit more and make sure that you water it plenty good. One little hack I have is if you're transplanting something in the heat of the summer, put a chair over it to give it some shade so it's not as in intensive sun. And if you do that for a week, or like if you recently planted, I had some people buy some peonies for me last year, and they transplanted them, and it was kind of warm. It was like the end of May, beginning of June, and it got warm, and it was a really hot, sunny spot. They started to wilt a little bit. Just chuck a chair over it for about a week. It'll help reduce the transplant shock. I mean, it's just a quick, easy tip. So if you're doing like a raised bed, I minimally 8 to 10 inches. And then have the bottom of it open to the ground too. Don't put things like landscape fabric at the bottom of the bed, the raised bed, and then put soil on top of that. Have that be open to the ground. If you're worried about potentially weeds or something growing up underneath that, you can just put layers of cardboard down. I actually have even been really lazy. I'm known to be lazy sometimes in my own garden. I have not even torn grass out. I just take a weed whacker, whack it down really, really low, put cardboard down, put the bed on top of it, and fill that full of soil. It works. It kills the grass eventually. So, yeah. You can. Sometimes people have animals too that will dig into their bed. You can put something like hardwood cloth in the bottom of the beds too if you have things like voles or something that want to dig into your bed. Okay.
Do you have a favorite garden center?
Yeah, there's a couple really good ones in town. And it's really important to support our local garden centers. Are disappearing. I swear they're just like disappearing one a year. But there's the big guys. There's Nick's, there's Ector's, there's Tagawa's. Those are some of our big ones. And you can find anything you want there. Sometimes their prices are a little pricey, but there is, I always want to call it Gardens at Spring Creek, but it's not that. Give me a second and I'll give it to him. It's a really lovely little one. So the gardens down in Highlands Ranch is also another really good one. They're a lovely little garden. Creekside. So Creekside Garden, which is just over in Littleton, they're a lovely. Willie and his wife run that one. Willie used to be the head grower for Welby Gardens. Welby Gardens is where a lot of these plants come from. They're my annual supplier. I buy in. I did this yesterday. I got over 250 flats in of annuals, and which I unloaded in the rain. And then I had to put it all away in my home nursery and in the rain. And so at one point I was in my front yard in my third rain jacket of the day, which was just an extra one I keep in the truck for some of the work guys, which is one of those big yellow rubber duck jackets. And it's like an extra extra large. And so it came down to here. And I was moving plants in the rain, and the only way to get through it was I put music on. And so here I am, and I had my sun hat on because it kept the rain off my face with my yellow duck hood up. And the only way to get through 5 hours of moving plants nonstop yesterday was dancing and singing in my front yard in the rain in my big rubber jacket. So, so Welby Gardens is the grower that I got of the order yesterday, and that's Hardy Boy bedding plants, unfortunately. So we've had a couple big growers as well leave us. So Center Greenhouse was a big, huge grower in Commerce City, and they closed many years ago, 5 years ago. And then Hardy Boy, which they've been around for 75 years, they just announced this spring that in the end of June they're closing. So Oh, the land is too valuable. They have to run their operations, they have to, have 5 acres plus, 5 acres of greenhouse space plus, and it's too valuable. So unfortunately, support the local garden centers because we really need them. We don't get the same type of care and the same versatile types of plants that you would get. Like, sure, Home Depots and Lowe's and all the box stores have a lot of plants, but you really get some of the unique stuff and better quality stuff and local stuff from local garden centers, plus the knowledge that they carry is extremely valuable. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a pain. No, you're not. I am a proponent of when you can dig it out, but there are things that are just tricky, like thistles and bindweed and that awful weedy campanula that gets in that you could pull till you're blue in the face, and you're never going to get rid of it. I mean, they say if you keep up on thistles and bindweed, eventually you'll get the better hand of it. But I mean, I've been weeding some out of gardens for years, and I'm like, when is that payoff going to happen? So I do prefer to pull when you can, but then sometimes you can't, and you have to use an herbicide. And so there, for grass, one of the more difficult things is, and it's in particular bluegrass, but there is a really weedy rhizomatous grass. It's a bigger leafed grass called quackgrass, and that thing is a pain. It's got roots that are Satan's spawn. They're horrible. And you break off a tiny chunk and it starts a whole new plant. So there is a couple sprays. It's called Grass Be Gone. Ortho makes it. And then Fertilome is over the top. So those two you can spray on a plant, say a peony, and it'll kill the grass. The key to it is it likes hot, it needs hot temperatures, so it needs to be like June when it's hot out, and it takes a while to work. So it takes a good 2 weeks or more. Most of the time you're used to using an herbicide and it happening overnight. This, it takes a good 2 weeks. So people use it and they don't think it works because it takes so long. So, but you have to be careful because it's very selective to monocot type plants. Monocot means grass type plants. So that's their leaf structure. So you have to be careful when you're using it on things like daylilies or irises because they are in the grass family. They've got long strap-like leaves with the veins running vertically with the leaves. So you do have to be careful. So it's called over the top. So it'll, in the information handout, they'll tell you which ones you can spray, which ones you can't spray, and then how selective you have to be when spraying the grass. You can always take one of those sponge foam paintbrushes and paint it on, which is a pain in the butt. So, it works great for that. And other weeds, if you've got, like I said, thistles are really big buggers that are really hard to get rid of and hard to dig out, like thistles. There is a good broadleaf weed killer. You can use it in your lawn and you can use it in your flower beds, but it kills broadleaf things, so you just can't go willy-nilly spraying it everywhere because it'll kill your peonies and your flowers and everything. But if you have a specific plant, you can always put a cardboard ring around it and selectively spray that. A really good and effective one. My thought is if you're going to use one, use a good one so you can kill it in 1 or 2 sprays versus having to spray it every 3 weeks, is Weed Free Zone, and Fertilome makes that. Fertilome might not be a brand name you guys are familiar with. They only sell to local garden centers, and they are a wonderful company, and they put a lot of research and time into their products. Are you pruning on it?
No.
Okay.
Is that why?
Well, it can be. So with your spring blooming shrubs like lilacs and forsythias, so any spring blooming plant, whether it be spireas, anything that blooms in the spring, the best time to prune those is in the spring right after they're done blooming. Because like these lilacs, which there's a lot of fun ones on this property, when they're done blooming, they set their buds for next year's blossoms within 3 weeks of them finish blooming. So here on some of these now or within the next couple weeks, they're setting their buds for next year's bloom. So if you go in and prune that all back, you're pruning all those flower buds off. So the sooner you do it, the better. That can be a reason. Too much shade can be a reason. Sometimes old shrubs, and forsythias is a big, huge, is everyone familiar with the forsythias? They're big, bright yellow. They're one of the very first things that bloom, and you'll see them all around town when you're driving around. They had a good bloom year this year. In fact, they're just kind of finishing up right now. I mean, they bloomed almost for a month, depending on how much sun they were in. So as a big shrub, so forsythias get big. They get to be like 10 feet tall and round, and they are a scraggly, ugly shrub. That's why I asked her if she pruned on hers, because they kind of are a gangly thing. They have branches that go wild and everywhere. So your tendency is wanted to kind of contain it. But they can get old and woody, and so can lilacs, you know, when they get those really big, huge trunks out of them. So it's best to do a rejuvenation pruning on them. And some people do a harsh or rejuvenation pruning by chopping the whole shrub to the ground. Okay, that's a really brutal one. I tend to not like to cut a shrub because it's a lot of work for it to send up that new growth, and then it tends to send up really suckery growth. So what I do is I do a 3-year rejuvenation pruning. So I take in a shrub the 3 largest, woodiest stems, or a third of the largest, woodiest stems, and prune those back to the ground. Okay, and then next year I will remove a third of the next biggest, woodiest stems. And then that following year, you remove that final third. And in the whole time of thinning it out, it's gonna throw up new suckers and new growth, and that'll help get it to bloom again for you. Forsythias is another one of those just lovely plants that'll live for hundreds of years. So they're just a really tough shrub, like lilacs. So, okay, yeah?
Sorry, I'm over.
Oh, great. No, you guys can keep asking. There are. So like, for example, we'll start with sunflowers because that's going to be your biggest in that design. They get anywhere from 4 to 5 feet to the giant ones, which can get 10 to 12 feet tall. The big giant ones are really lovely in your garden. Mammoth is a good variety of that. Not a great cut flower, because what are you going to do with a head this big? They're just fabulous to have. You'll have every squirrel over for a sunflower seed party in your yard. So there's 2 different types of sunflowers that you would use in cut flowers. So there are like the Pro Cut series, which is a one and done. So it is going to throw up a stalk, and they're going to get to be that 4 to 5 feet in range, and they're going to produce 1 flower per plant. Okay, and then there are the branching varieties. So the cut and done sunflowers produce really pretty sunflowers. They're on a thinner stem. They're just lovely, and they come in burnt, like a rusty burnt red color. They come in orange and yellow and butter yellow and cream, and they come in all really pretty colors. So they're really desired for cut flowers. Now you want to plant them, and I have it in there. Most of the plants in there are 2 plants per square foot. These Pro Cut sunflowers, you actually plant 9 plants per square foot. Okay, and what that does is that causes that sunflower to grow tall and skinny, so it doesn't have a super thick stem. That's one of the problems with sunflowers, is a sunflower can put on a stem that's hard to cut through with a pair of pruners, and that does nothing for an arrangement. I mean, that's too difficult to work with. So the other type of sunflowers you can use, you would plant a lot less of those sunflowers. So you would plant maybe 2 in that square foot space. And those are bushing types. I think I have like here's a sunflower mix here with all these pretty colors, and they're a branching variety. So they're going to get tall and big, and they're going to get to be that 4 to 5 feet tall, but they're going to have sunflowers all along its stems. Okay? Those are great because you cut individual stems. Their flowers tend to be a little less perfect, but who cares? So, but then there are some that more dwarf varieties that you can use that stay smaller. So the majority of this cut flower garden are big plants that I designed. So you've got in there cosmos, which I never think of cosmos as super tall, but they can, the ones for cut flowers, and they get really bushy. So you can get endless amount of cut flowers off of those cosmos plants. So those you only plant 2 per square foot. And same thing with the zinnias. All of these, by the way, have shorter versions of them. So that's why I didn't list specific cultivar varieties, because even the dahlias, like these dahlias here are big dahlias, but there's lots of dahlias that stay in that 2 to 3 foot range. They don't give you as long of stems. A lot of the reasons why you grow cut flowers, tall ones, is so you get long stems to work with. But there's plenty of beautiful dahlias that are on like a 12-inch stem, and you can do those as dwarf. And same with zinnias. You can go with a shorter variety. Don't go with like the bushy landscape ones I was talking at the beginning. You do want to have a longer individual stem, because those bushing ones, I mean, they just aren't great as cut flowers. So, but most of these plants are going to get 30 inches to the 4 feet to 5 feet. So big guys. That's why I said keep your stakes ready. And then perennials. And then we didn't really talk about it, but mixing. So let's say you have an established perennial bed, and you can always add a couple of these that produce a few more cut flowers, but the annuals are lovely tucked in. Like I was talking earlier, like this verbena tucks into a perennial bed, great. You know, I usually do them in like little clusters of 3 spaced about a fist width apart, and then just dot them in your landscape. It does great. Cosmos and snapdragons are also great if you have existing perennial beds. Just tuck a cluster of them. Where you would plant a perennial, plant a cluster of the cosmos. Plant a cluster of the snapdragons. And that way you can have both the perennials and the annuals tucked in there as well. The dahlias are also great tucked in to perennial beds, especially if you have a lot of the big back borders. Those dahlias were great tucked in there. Not in a raised bed usually, and you have to be careful with sand because we have really heavy clay soils, and if you mix like the wrong type of sand in our soil, you will make concrete. So you have to be careful with that. So it's better to add something like horticultural grit or something like that, which is like a gravel and it's a little bit bigger if you are really having a drainage problem. Otherwise, just amending those areas really well. We always think of peat moss and compost as moisture retentive additives, which they are, but they can also help with drainage. You can also get big bags of perlite as well. The grow stores, any local grow store carries like 4 cubic foot bags of perlite. You can always mix perlite into your soil to help loosen it up too. Is it that you have really heavy clay and you're having bad drainage? You just have to be careful. It has to be a coarse enough sand, but I would amend it better because it's what it is. It's just clay is not bad for plants. Plants really don't care, other than that it can be too wet. So our clay soils are really fine particle soils, and so what those fine particles, they are really close together. Where if you think of something that's bigger particles, there's a lot more pore space in between big particles. And so with clay, the soil structure is really close together. So there's not little tiny, and we're talking on a microscopic scale, there's no tiny little air pockets. And so that's why there's nothing, those air pockets, there's nothing to fill with water, and they just sit there and fill with water, and it doesn't drain well. And so just amending those areas by adding compost, an inch of compost to your flower beds every year. Some people don't do mulch. Some people just mulch with compost. And then as you weed and plant things in it, that compost just slowly works into the soil. That in itself will help drainage a lot.